When you think of 007 games, naturally you think of the N64 classic GoldenEye, a trailblazer for not just the 007 franchise or the FPS genre, but its impact on gaming as a whole cannot be understated. However, since then, Bond has had some rough entries, and while I've made my own video discussing how I loved the N64 follow-up, The World Is Not Enough, link in the description below, the consensus is there hasn't been a Bond game that recreated the magic that GoldenEye did. Now, at this point, I really should mention that I am a massive James Bond fan. I've seen all the movies numerous times and I've read many of the books, and I can appreciate how the series has evolved over time. So when 007 First Light got announced, I was absolutely over the moon and probably the most hyped I've been for a game in a long time. I really wanted this to succeed because this license has not seen a lot of love when it comes to video games for such a long time. And I was ready to see a different kind of Bond since Daniel Craig has handed in his license to kill. Never have I wanted a game to succeed more than this one. But I am so pleased to say that 007 First Light is not just a good game, but it is so clearly the best game this franchise has delivered since GoldenEye. In the same way that Indiana Jones and the Great Circle was essentially a movie that you could play, and it captured the essence of an Indiana Jones film, First Light does the exact same thing for the Bond franchise, and it does it right out of the gate. So before I talk about gameplay, I need to talk about the look and feel of First Light. Please be aware for minor spoilers ahead in this video. After an opening sequence showing Bond as an airman that has crashed on a mission in Iceland, not yet a 00 and suddenly finding himself as MI6's last resort in a crucial mission, the young and headstrong Bond pulls off a daring rescue, earning his spot in the revamped 00 program. It was after this moment that I knew this game was going to be amazing, because the title sequence rolled. Now, for those who don't know, each Bond film has its own opening sequence with its own visuals, artist, and music, which helps set the tone for the movie that you are about to watch. The fact that they got Lana Del Rey to do this song was incredible because I could totally see her doing a Bond track, and the visuals in the title sequences are fantastic and completely believable for what I could expect from a film. It blew me away and I knew I was in for a good time. Even Bond himself was fantastic. Patrick Gibson does a superb job of voicing a Bond that is young, fresh, brash, and at times has his own moments of vulnerability, while still being a loyal and sometimes reckless individual, but with enough charm and swagger to deliver some slick one-liners.
Well, I didn't realize you were this thirsty.
Parched, actually.
On the look and feel, I want to talk for a moment about brands. I think it is extremely important to talk about the brands in this game specifically because, bear with me, sometimes it can be a bit jarring when a real-life brand inserts themselves into a video game, and usually I'm not really a fan. But there are instances where you want that real brand in your game. For example, Forza Horizon 6 just wouldn't work if it didn't have the actual brand names for the cars you can drive. The EA FC series, for the most part, uses real teams and players. When it comes to Bond, you need the actual brands to help further portray that this is a real Bond experience, and thankfully, in First Light, they nail this. Bond doesn't just use any old gadget watch, it's an Omega gadget watch that you can even choose which band style you like. Aston Martin, Range Rover, and Jaguar also make appearances in ways that make sense and further fit within the world of Bond, without feeling like blatant advertising. You could maybe argue this Jaguar Type 00 could be a bit in your face, but even then I'm willing to forgive it, and there are other brands that do this as well throughout the entire game. The only name missing to complete the world is Walther PPK, Bond's iconic pistol. I know a lot of games in recent years haven't been using real gun names, but I'm a little surprised that this wasn't included given how many official licenses were already awarded to this game. Bond still does wield a weapon that looks at a glance identical to a PPK, but it is instead referred to as the service pistol. I know I'm harping on a bit about having brands in my game, but First Light needs to have credibility, and this all helps it feel like an authentic experience. It holds as much weight as the Bond theme music, the iconic gun barrel sequence, vodka martinis, shaken not stirred, or even the iconic line, "The name is Bond, James Bond." These things are important because previous Bond games have failed in the past to get correct licensing and branding, which made it at times feel like somewhat cheap imitations instead of the real deal. 007 First Light does not make this mistake, and it clearly pays dividends. So the look and feel is there, but let's get into the nuts and bolts of the game. As I alluded to earlier, First Light doesn't follow an experienced 007, but rather a young and fresh Bond that is a promising up-and-comer who has to prove that his accomplishments in foiling an enemy operation in Iceland was not just blind luck, but rather a testament to his resourcefulness and character. This inexperienced and eager-to-prove version of the character still makes mistakes as the game follows his journey throughout the reignited 00 program as he hopes to earn his number. The game uses Bond's training sessions as a means to teach the player the controls, mechanics, and various ways you can handle different scenarios that you might find yourself in across the game. Now, I don't personally think this game has Hitman levels of variation in terms of how you can approach the scenarios, but there are options which help give it good replay value. Sometimes you can choose to go loud and kill everyone in your path, you can choose to go quiet and sneak through an area undetected, but you even have opportunities available to you that lean into some classic Bond tropes. Using gadgets to subdue venue staff to get keycards is good fun, but nothing compares to just confidently walking into an area that you're absolutely not supposed to be in, bluffing suspicious witnesses with some lame excuse, but delivered with such swagger that they just accept whatever you say and won't further question you unless you loiter around for too long. It's so stupid, and if any other game did this, it might come across as gimmicky or cheap, but because this is so James Bond, it just works.
Trooper? What are you doing up here? There's an intruder in the lower levels.
Well, we didn't hear.
Keep your ears open and you might next time.
I've got a bad feeling about this.
Now, these bluffs aren't completely free. Bond can earn instinct points throughout normal gameplay, such as taking down enemies or eavesdropping conversations, and these points have to be used to do special actions such as bluffing, fake surrendering, or even slowing down time, allowing Bond to focus in and aim with precision in combat. It's a great system which isn't too restrictive and gives you the freedom to navigate levels in your own way. The gadgets themselves also have limited uses, such as the laser watch or dart phone, but there are plenty of opportunities to refill batteries or chemicals, so you don't feel too restricted in how many times you can use the gadgets, while still encouraging you to explore different ways to progress through the levels. The combat itself isn't super amazing, but satisfying enough to keep me going. However, it was again how the gunplay leaned into these Bond tropes that helped keep me engaged. Running between cover, shooting with crazy precision, taking on enemies in hand-to-hand combat with a mix of parries and grappling, even using gadgets to help give you the edge. I really enjoyed all the combos in throwing weapons at enemies, performing a finisher, and picking up the enemy's weapon to carry on with. Bond is pretty overpowered in the films, seemingly being able to walk out of a barrage of gunfire and firing a couple rounds from his handgun with more lethality than a missile. It might sound ludicrous, and it is, but the game gets the license to abuse this with great effect because it fits the bill of what we've come to expect of Bond. One thing I will say is you can't really replenish ammo in 007 First Light, as you are encouraged to throw empty weapons and pick up new ones. If you do kill an enemy with the same gun as you, you'll only pick up a small handful of bullets, as the game is really encouraging you to play with more flair instead of mimicking a Call of Duty clone, which is something previous Bond games have made the mistake of doing in the past. Now, I'm going to go a little deeper into characters and story, just keep in mind for spoilers once again. When it comes to the story and Bond himself, I don't think it's going to rival some of Bond's previous on-screen adventures, although that is perhaps an unfair comparison. But I will say that I really enjoyed this up-and-coming Bond that is still learning the ropes and trying to understand how MI6 operates. Bond starts out as a bit of a lad, mucking around with his fellow trainees and pushing the boundaries, much to the disapproval of his handlers, but over time grows to understand and act on his responsibility and duty. I appreciated that Bond has had a good balance of light and shade throughout my playthrough, from his scrapes with Monroe in training to moments where he struggles to cope with tragedy that struck on his watch. One thing that remains consistent with Bond from start to finish is his desire to accomplish the mission by any means possible, no matter how unconventional or below board his methods may be. This is again something that Bond in the films is known for, which helps make some of his reckless yet understandable actions not only justifiable, but also believable. As a result, this gives some time for characters around Bond to foster a stronger appreciation to his approach. While some characters like Moneypenny and Q took to Bond fairly early on, I enjoyed seeing the growth in other MI6 authority figures like M and Greenway as they slowly warmed up to Bond. In fact, speaking of Greenway, the relationship between him and Bond was not only a highlight, but perhaps the strongest element of the story. Initially, Greenway finds Bond irritating in the early stages of the 00 program, but then grows to having to tolerate him on the Mauritania mission, chasing the shadows of 009, then finally reaching a level of appreciation and mutual respect between the two characters. The pacing and build-up between these two is done to perfection and ultimately pays off with a touching passing of the flame moment. It's weighty, meaningful, memorable, and well-earned without feeling tacky or forced.
Thought I told you to go home.
Needed some fresh air.
Clearly.
I didn't have too many problems with the story itself. I found the setup of having an agent from the past, 009, coming back into the frame worked well to help build that connection with Bond and Greenway, but once the story thickens out to reveal the true antagonist to be a tech pioneer using his technology as a means to infiltrate MI6, it wasn't exactly a shock, and it could be seen coming from a mile away. I also personally didn't care too much for his son, who wasn't particularly memorable. The fights where he had his mech suit just gave me discount Gustav Graves vibes, which didn't really work for me, especially seeing as I didn't like Die Another Day. But the truth of the matter is that the story itself was sufficient enough because the portrayal of Bond, the locations, the set pieces, it all exuded the typical Bond theatrics I've come to expect, and I really appreciated them. This was really highlighted in particular set pieces such as the chess match or the nightclub sequence, as Bond has to do genuine detective work, but all in these busy environments that once again echo the scenarios that you would see in a film. My only real gripe is perhaps the Mauritania section, where Bond needs to scramble up $100,000 to gain access to an auction, and the game forces you to run around doing tasks such as minigames, fights, or side hustle infiltrating to scrounge up the cash. Look, maybe in a different game this would work, but it felt just like busy chores, and I really do feel that Bond would have found some other way to access that auction. It just didn't vibe with me, and is maybe one of the few things that prevents me from calling this game a total masterpiece, but it luckily didn't hold me back from my overall enjoyment of this fantastic title. IO Interactive absolutely cooked with this title, and as not just someone who enjoys video games, but as a Bond fan, this game really hits the spot for me. The set pieces, the locations, Bond himself, it was all presented in a way which was not just great from an entertainment standpoint, but it also paid respect to the franchise itself in a way that fans really did feel this was almost a genuine film. I am so glad that this game managed to come together, because previous games have been played with licensing issues or an identity crisis due to trying to be a weird Call of Duty clone. IO Interactive were blessed to maximize their full creativity with the full backing of the license and managed to navigate all these challenges and produce a game for the fans. First Light is not just a good game, but a true James Bond adventure that feels it really could be a movie. It's fun, it's genuine, and it absolutely earns its 007 number. Thank you very much for watching this discussion video. If you enjoyed, please leave a like and comment below to let me know your thoughts on 007 First Light. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to see more videos that will be coming out shortly. And once again, thank you so much for watching. Lancey out.